Welcome to our deep dive, exploring the fundamentals of economics. We'll be drawing on the book Economia per Non-Economistas as our guide, and we'll be illustrating these concepts with some real-world examples from Uruguay. So what exactly is economics? Well, it's the study of how we, as humans, manage scarce resources, to produce and distribute all those goods and services we rely on. The key concept here is scarcity. We've got these unlimited wants and needs, right? But the resources to fulfill them, well, those are limited, which forces us to make choices. So let's dive into the different types of goods and services that make up an economy. First up, we've got free goods, like the air we breathe, abundant and readily available. However, most goods aren't free. Economic goods, like food and clothing, are scarce and transferable. These are the goods we typically think of when we talk about economics. Then there are services, like the work of an electrician or the amenities you get at a hotel, also considered economic goods because they satisfy human needs, even though they're not physical objects. Now, to produce all these goods and services, we need what are called factors of production. These are the essential building blocks of any economy. In Economia para Non-Economistas, they're classified as natural resources, labor, and capital. Picture Uruguay's vast agricultural lands, the hardworking ranchers, and the machinery they use. Those represent the factors of production and action. Now, every choice we make involves an opportunity cost. It's the value of the next best alternative we forego when making a decision. Let's say you decide to spend your Saturday afternoon at the cinema in Montevideo. The opportunity cost is the value of the next best thing you could have done with that time, perhaps working or studying. And this concept isn't limited to individual choices. It applies to entire societies as well. The production possibilities frontier, a key economic model, illustrates this. It shows the trade-offs a society faces when deciding how to allocate its limited resources to produce different combinations of goods. Speaking of societies, let's talk about different economic systems. On one end of the spectrum, we have a pure free market system. In this system, private agents, like families and companies, make resource allocation decisions with minimal government intervention. On the other end, we have a completely centralized system where the state owns the means of production, and a central planning body dictates how resources are used. In reality, most economies, including Uruguay's, operate as a mixed system, combining elements of both free markets and centralized control. The government might intervene to provide public goods, for example, things like national defense or education. These are difficult to provide efficiently through the free market alone. Now, it's important to note that there are different ways to approach the study of economics. Positive economics focuses on objective analysis and cause and effect relationships. It aims to explain what is and how things work, without making value judgments. Normative economics, on the other hand, involves value judgment and policy recommendations. It deals with what ought to be, and often guides policy decisions. Within the field of economics, we can also distinguish between two main branches, microeconomics and macroeconomics. Microeconomics examines the behavior of individuals and firms, looking at how they made decisions regarding production, consumption, and pricing in specific markets. For example, microeconomics might analyze how Uruguayan ranchers decide how much beef to produce, based on market prices. Macroeconomics, on the other hand, analyzes the economy as a whole, focusing on issues like national income, unemployment, inflation, and economic growth, seeking to understand the overall performance of, say, the Uruguayan economy. When analyzing economic data, it's crucial to differentiate between nominal and real variables. Nominal variables are measured at current prices, without adjusting for inflation. Real variables, however, are adjusted for price changes, revealing the true changes in quantities over time. Price indices, like the Consumer Price Index, are essential tools for converting nominal values to real values. Economists use models to simplify complex realities and understand how economic factors interact. One area where models are widely used is in consumer theory. This branch of economics analyzes how individuals make consumption decisions based on their preferences, income, and the prices of goods and services. Consumer theory rests on several key assumptions. Economists assume that consumers are rational, meaning they aim to maximize their satisfaction, given their limited resources. They also assume that consumer preferences are complete, meaning consumers can rank all possible combinations of goods. Furthermore, preferences are assumed to be transitive. If a consumer prefers A to B and B to C, they also prefer A to C. Finally, economists assume that consumers prefer more of a good to less, a concept known as non-satiation. These assumptions, while simplifying reality, provide a framework for understanding consumer behavior. In difference curves, a graphical representation of consumer preferences show different combinations of goods, combinations that provide the same level of satisfaction to a consumer. Think of it like this. You're choosing between combinations of mate, that's a traditional Uruguayan beverage, and alfajores, delicious cookies. An indifference curve would map out all the combinations of mate and alfajores that give you the same level of enjoyment. These curves have two important properties. First, they have a negative slope, reflecting the trade-offs consumers face. To get more mate, you have to give up some alfajores, and vice versa. Second, indifference curves are convex to the origin, meaning consumers are less willing to give up a good as they have less of it. This reflects the diminishing marginal utility of consumption. Each additional unit of a good provides less satisfaction than the previous one. Of course, consumers' choices are limited by their income and the prices of goods. This is captured by the budget constraint, which shows the different combinations of goods a consumer can afford, given their income and the prevailing prices. Imagine a budget constraint for mate and alfajores based on your income and their prices in Uruguay. The consumer optimum represents the point where the consumer maximizes their satisfaction, given their budget constraint. Graphically, it's the point where the highest possible indifference curve is tangent to the budget constraint. This tells us the ideal combination of mate and alfajores you would choose to maximize your enjoyment within your budget. Now let's shift our attention to the demand side of the market. The demand for a good or service is not static. It's influenced by various factors, including income. As income increases, the demand for normal goods tends to rise. For instance, as Uruguayans' incomes rise, their demand for higher quality beef cuts might increase. Conversely, the demand for inferior goods might decrease as income rises, because consumers can afford better alternatives. Another crucial factor influencing demand is the price of related goods. When the price of a substitute good falls, the demand for the original good might decline, as consumers switch to the cheaper alternative. Imagine if the price of imported Argentinian wine falls significantly. This could lead to a decrease in demand for Uruguayan Tanat wine. The price elasticity of demand measures how sensitive the quantity demanded is to price changes. Elastic demand implies that a small change in price leads to a large change in quantity demanded. Inelastic demand, on the other hand, means that quantity demanded is relatively unresponsive to price changes. Now let's turn our focus to the production side of the economy. Economists typically assume that producers aim to maximize profits. Profit is the difference between total revenue and total cost. The production function describes the relationship between inputs used in production, like labor and capital, and the resulting output. Consider a Uruguayan winery. The number of workers, the size of the vineyard, and the equipment used. All of those represent inputs that determine the quantity of wine produced. An essential concept in production theory is diminishing returns. This principle states that as we add more of a single input, keeping all other inputs constant, the marginal output will eventually decline. Imagine the winery continuously hiring more workers, without expanding the vineyard or adding equipment. At some point, the additional workers would contribute less and less to the total output. Isocost lines represent different combinations of inputs that cost the same for the producer. They're similar to the budget constraint we discussed earlier, but instead of focusing on consumer choices, they apply to production decisions, just as consumers seek to maximize satisfaction given their budget constraint. Producers aim to minimize their costs for a given level of output. The producer's optimum represents the cost-minimizing combination of inputs. Graphically, it's the point where the isoquant, a curve representing all possible combinations of inputs that yield a given output level, is tangent to the isocost line. This tells us the most efficient way for the winery to combine labor and capital, to produce a certain quantity of wine at the lowest possible cost. The structure of a market significantly impacts how producers behave. In a perfectly competitive market, numerous small firms produce identical products, and there are no barriers to entry or exit. Firms in perfect competition are price takers, meaning they have no control over the price, and must accept the market price. The agricultural sector in Uruguay, with many small producers of commodities like soybeans, exhibits some characteristics of perfect competition. At the other end of the spectrum is a monopoly, where a single firm dominates the market, facing no competition. Monopolists have significant control over the price of their product. While true monopolies are rare, certain industries, like utilities, may exhibit monopolistic tendencies. Monopolistic competition lies between perfect competition and monopoly. Many firms produce differentiated products, giving them some degree of market power. For example, the restaurant industry in Uruguay, with numerous restaurants offering diverse cuisines and dining experiences, exhibits features of monopolistic competition. The supply curve, which depicts the relationship between the price of a good and the quantity supplied, can shift due to several factors. Changes in input prices can directly impact production costs. Technological advancements can increase productivity, allowing firms to produce more output with the same amount of inputs. shifting the supply curve outward. Changes in the number of producers in the market can also affect the overall supply of a good. Now let's delve into the world of macroeconomics. We'll start with national income accounting, a framework for measuring economic activity. This framework allows us to track a country's overall economic performance. A key measure within this framework is gross domestic product, or GDP, which represents the total value of goods and services produced within a country's borders during a specific period. The circular flow of income model illustrates the dynamic relationship between households and firms. Households supply factors of production to firms, earning income in the form of wages, rent, and profits. Firms, in turn, use these factors to produce goods and services, which they sell to households, generating revenue. This continuous flow of income and spending underpins economic activity. Aggregate demand is a core concept in macroeconomics. It represents the total demand for goods and services in an economy. At a given price level, it's composed of four main components: consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. Consumption refers to household spending on goods and services. Investment represents spending by firms on capital goods, like machinery and equipment. Government spending encompasses all government expenditures on goods and services. Finally, net exports represent the difference between a country's exports and imports. Understanding aggregate demand is crucial for analyzing economic fluctuations and formulating macroeconomic policies. Investment decisions play a crucial role in driving economic activity. The Keynesian perspective emphasizes the role of expectations and uncertainty in influencing these decisions. Businesses are more likely to invest when they feel confident about future economic prospects. Now let's consider the public sector's role in the economy. Public choice theory analyzes government decision-making through an economic lens. It examines how politicians and bureaucrats make choices, and how those choices affect the economy. Governments intervene in markets for various reasons, including addressing market failures and redistributing income. Market failures occur when the free market fails to allocate resources efficiently. As in the case of pollution or public goods, redistribution of income involves government policies designed to reduce income inequality. Fiscal policy is a crucial tool governments use to influence the economy. It involves adjustments to government spending and taxation. Governments can increase spending or reduce taxes to stimulate aggregate demand and bolster economic activity. Conversely, they can decrease spending or raise taxes to curb inflation or shrink budget deficits. Money is the lifeblood of any economy, facilitating transactions and serving as a medium of exchange. It allows us to buy and sell goods and services without resorting to barter. It also acts as a unit of account, providing a common measure of value for goods and services. Additionally, money serves as a store of value, enabling us to hold purchasing power over time. The financial system plays a crucial role in channeling funds from savers to borrowers. At the heart of this system lies the central bank, responsible for monetary policy. The central bank controls the money supply and interest rates to maintain price stability and foster economic growth. Commercial banks act as intermediaries, accepting deposits from individuals and businesses, and providing loans to facilitate investment and consumption. Money market equilibrium occurs when the supply of money, determined by the central bank, equals the demand for money. This demand is influenced by factors like income, interest rates, and expectations. Now, inflation could be a real headache for policymakers. It's that persistent increase in the general price level, and it really erodes purchasing power. Plus, it can throw a wrench in the gears of economic activity. We can break it down into two main types: demand pull and cost push. Demand pull inflation kicks in when aggregate demand outpaces the economy's ability to produce, leading to upward pressure on prices. Imagine everyone in Uruguay suddenly has more money to spend, but the supply of goods and services just can't keep up. Businesses would likely raise prices to take advantage of that increased buying power. Then there's cost push inflation, stemming from rising production costs. So when businesses have to shell out more for inputs like labor, energy, or raw materials, they often pass those costs along to consumers as higher prices. Think of the impact a surge in global oil prices could have on transportation costs, and then how those costs would ripple through to the prices of goods and services in Uruguay. Uruguay has actually wrestled with both demand pull and cost push inflation throughout its economic history. During those periods of rapid growth, robust domestic demand and increased government spending fueled inflationary pressures. And external factors, like those fluctuating global commodity prices, have also played a part. To combat inflation, policymakers use a mix of monetary and fiscal policies. Monetary policy involves actions by the central bank to influence the money supply and interest rates. In Uruguay, the Banco Central del Uruguay steps in to adjust interest rates, manage the exchange rate, and set reserve requirements for banks. These are all tools to control the amount of money circulating in the economy and put the brakes on inflation. Then there's fiscal policy, which involves changes in government spending and taxation. By controlling spending and adjusting tax rates, policymakers can steer aggregate demand and help stabilize prices. Uruguay's government has used fiscal policy to manage inflation, tweaking spending levels and tax policies to keep demand in check. Let's shift gears and talk about unemployment. That's the state of being without a job while actively looking for work. Uruguay, just like many other countries, has seen its unemployment rate go up and down over time. This is due to both cyclical and structural factors. Cyclical unemployment is tied directly to the ups and downs of the business cycle. When the economy takes a downturn, businesses often have to lay off workers, leading to higher unemployment. On the flip side, during expansions, businesses hire more workers to meet growing demand, which lowers unemployment. Uruguay's unemployment rate has fluctuated right alongside global economic cycles and how well the domestic economy has been performing. Now, structural unemployment comes from a mismatch between the skills workers have and the skills employers are looking for. Technological advancements that make certain skills obsolete or shifts in the very structure of the economy can contribute to structural unemployment. Think about the impact of automation on manufacturing jobs in Uruguay. Workers displaced by those changes might find it tough to land new jobs that match their existing skills. Uruguay has also had to deal with structural unemployment in its agricultural sector. Technological advancements and global competition have shrunk the demand for agricultural labor. Workers without the skills for other industries have ended up unemployed. To tackle structural unemployment, we need policies that focus on skills development and retraining. Equipping workers with the skills needed for industries that are growing can help Uruguay reduce structural unemployment and make its economy more competitive. Investments in education and training programs targeted at in-demand skills can help those workers transition to new opportunities. Public policies are crucial for dealing with both cyclical and structural unemployment. When a recession hits, governments can use expansionary fiscal policies like increasing spending on infrastructure projects or offering tax cuts. This creates jobs and stimulates demand, which can help lessen cyclical unemployment by giving the whole economy a boost. For structural unemployment, governments can invest in education and training programs, offer subsidies for businesses that hire from specific groups, and give incentives for firms to set up shop in areas with high unemployment. These initiatives help workers get the skills they need for up-and-coming industries and can draw businesses to areas that are struggling with joblessness. Uruguay's economy relies heavily on international trade, which makes it sensitive to what's happening in the global economy. It's a major exporter of agricultural products like beef, wool, and soybeans. It also exports manufactured goods like textiles and leather products. International trade has a lot of benefits. It lets countries specialize in producing what they're good at, what they have a comparative advantage in, leading to greater efficiency, lower prices, and a wider variety of goods for consumers. Uruguay is good at specializing in agricultural production. It's got the natural resources and the know-how to produce goods it can then trade on the global market. But international trade isn't without its challenges. Swings in global commodity prices can have a big impact on exporting countries like Uruguay. A sudden dip in the price of beef or soybeans on the world market could hurt Uruguay's export earnings and its economic growth. Depending on just a few export markets also creates vulnerabilities. If one of Uruguay's major trading partners experiences an economic downturn, demand for Uruguayan exports could plummet, hitting the domestic economy hard. To mitigate these risks, Uruguay has been working to diversify its economy. The aim is to broaden its export base and not be so reliant on a few key products and markets. Uruguay has also joined trade agreements, like the Mercosur trade bloc. This promotes trade and breaks down barriers with neighboring countries, giving them preferential access to larger markets, which can soften the blow of those global demand fluctuations. The exchange rate, which tells us the value of one currency compared to another, plays a crucial role in international trade. It influences the prices of goods and services between countries. Uruguay has used different exchange rate regimes throughout its history, moving between fixed exchange rates and floating rates. A fixed exchange rate regime, where the value of the Uruguayan peso is pegged to another currency, maybe the US dollar, offers stability and predictability for businesses involved in international trade. That stability can make it easier for businesses to plan and invest. Knowing exchange rate swings won't mess with their costs or revenues. However, a fixed rate can tie the central bank's hands when it comes to responding to economic shocks. Let's say Uruguay's economy takes a hit, while its fixed exchange rate partner remains strong. The central bank might not be able to lower interest rates or devalue the currency to stimulate the economy because that could undermine the fixed exchange rate. A floating exchange rate regime, where the peso's value is set by market forces, gives more flexibility in responding to economic changes. In this system, the exchange rate adjusts based on supply and demand in the foreign exchange market. If demand for Uruguayan pesos is up, maybe because of strong exports or more foreign investment, the peso will gain value. But if demand drops, the peso will lose value. This flexibility lets the central bank use monetary policy more effectively to manage the economy. For example, if Uruguay is dealing with inflation, the central bank can raise interest rates to cool down demand, and that can potentially appreciate the currency, making imports cheaper, helping to moderate those price increases. But a floating exchange rate can lead to volatility, creating uncertainty for businesses engaged in international trade. Managing the exchange rate is a balancing act. Policymakers have to carefully consider the advantages of stability against the need to be flexible when economic conditions are constantly shifting. The choice of exchange rate regime depends on the specific situation of a country, its economic structure, and its policy goals. Now let's talk about the balance of payments. This provides a detailed record of a country's economic dealings with the rest of the world. It tracks flows of goods, services, and capital, giving us a peek into a country's economic health and its relationship with the global economy. It's made up of two main accounts, the current account and the capital account. The current account tracks trade in goods and services, net income from abroad, and net transfers. When a country has a current account surplus, it means it's earning more from its exports and investments abroad than it's spending on imports and sending abroad. This surplus tells us the country is a net lender to the rest of the world. A current account deficit, on the other hand, means a country is spending more than it's earning, indicating it's a net borrower. The capital account keeps tabs on capital flows, things like foreign direct investment, portfolio investment, and loans. A capital account surplus shows that a country is attracting more capital inflows than it's sending out. It suggests it's a good place for foreigners to invest. A capital account deficit indicates the opposite. The country is investing more abroad than it's receiving in foreign investment. This could reflect domestic savings flowing out or foreign borrowing to finance domestic investment. Uruguay's balance of payments has gone up and down over time, reflecting changes in its trade patterns, investment flows, and global economic conditions. Understanding those dynamics is crucial for policymakers to make informed decisions about trade, investment, and exchange rate policies. Economic growth, which is a sustained increase in a country's real GDP per capita, is essential for raising living standards and tackling economic challenges. Uruguay has gone through times of strong growth and periods of stagnation. Both domestic and external factors play a role in that. Investments in physical capital like infrastructure and machinery are critical drivers of economic growth. By boosting its productive capacity, a country can produce more goods and services, leading to higher incomes and more jobs. Imagine the impact of modernizing Uruguay's ports and transportation infrastructure. Those improvements could give exports a shot in the arm, attract foreign investment, and create jobs across different sectors. Investments in human capital, which includes education and skills training, are just as important. By improving the skills and knowledge of its workforce, a country can increase its productivity, innovation, and ability to compete. Think about the long-term benefits of investing in quality education and training for young people in Uruguay. A more skilled and adaptable workforce could lead to higher-paying jobs, more innovation, and a more dynamic and competitive economy. Technological advancements are another key driver of economic growth. By adopting new technologies and encouraging innovation, Uruguay can boost productivity, reduce costs, and create entirely new industries. Think of the potential in supporting the growth of Uruguay's tech sector, which is still emerging. It could create new export opportunities, attract skilled workers, and contribute to a more diversified and resilient economy. Uruguay's economic policies have focused on promoting growth by creating a business-friendly environment, supporting innovation, and developing human capital. Its membership in Mercosur and other trade agreements are all about expanding export markets and attracting foreign investment. But economic growth on its own isn't enough to ensure sustainable development. We have to think about how income and opportunities are distributed, making sure that the benefits of growth are shared widely and fairly. So Uruguay's path toward economic development has been marked by some key policy decisions and structural shifts. One period that stands out is the introduction of the Tablita Plan back in the late 1970s. It was a stabilization program with a big goal: to rein in the hyperinflation that had been plaguing the country. The Tablita Plan worked by pre-announcing these gradual reductions in the rate of devaluation of the Uruguayan peso. The idea was to break that cycle of inflationary expectations, where everyone's expecting prices to just keep going up and their actions end up fueling even more inflation. And at first, the Tablita plan worked pretty well. Inflation dropped significantly, but then it ran into some roadblocks. The fixed exchange rate regime left Uruguay exposed to shocks from outside. Capital flight started to happen, investors pulled their money out of the country, and that put pressure on the peso. In the end, the Tablita plan was scrapped in the early 1980s. It just goes to show how tricky it can be to manage exchange rates and keep inflation under control when the global economy is so unpredictable. Another big turning point in Uruguay's economic history was its decision to join the Mercosur trade bloc in 1991. Mercosur is a regional trade agreement that aims to open up trade and increase economic cooperation between its members: Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. For Uruguay, Mercosur has opened up new export markets and given it access to a much wider range of goods and services. It's also forged closer economic and political ties with its neighbors, strengthening regional integration. But it hasn't been all smooth sailing. Mercosur has had its share of trade disputes, and there are economic imbalances between member countries. Plus, external shocks that have hit the whole region have put the bloc's resilience to the test. Uruguay's experience as part of Mercosur highlights both the potential and the complexities of regional economic integration. It underscores the need for careful coordination and management of those trade relationships. That's how you maximize the benefits and minimize any potential downsides. A well-functioning financial system is a must for any country that wants to navigate the global economy effectively. And Uruguay's financial system has undergone some major reforms in recent decades. These reforms were all about making it more resilient and efficient. The Banco Central del Uruguay, the country's central bank, plays a critical role in overseeing the financial system. It regulates banks, manages the money supply, and works to ensure financial stability. Then you've got the commercial banks, which provide a whole range of services like taking deposits, making loans, and processing payments. These institutions are key for moving money from savers to borrowers, supporting investment and economic growth. Uruguay's financial system has faced its share of challenges. There have been banking crises, and global financial markets can be volatile. The central bank has had to step in to respond to these challenges. They've implemented measures to stabilize the system and make sure depositors are protected. These experiences really highlight how crucial robust regulation, effective supervision, and proactive crisis management are. That's how you keep the financial system stable and resilient. It's like the circulatory system of the economy. The financial system is vital for channeling savings into productive investments, which fuels economic growth. And a stable, efficient financial system is a magnet for foreign investment and helps businesses develop. That all leads to more jobs, innovation, and overall economic prosperity. We've talked a lot about economic growth, and it is a vital objective for any country. But it's equally important to consider how income and opportunities are distributed within society. Reducing income inequality and boosting social mobility are crucial for achieving truly sustainable and equitable development. Uruguay has put various policies in place to try to reduce poverty and promote social inclusion. These include social assistance programs, investments in education, and progressive taxation. Social assistance programs provide a safety net for low-income households, helping them cover basic needs and improve their standard of living. Investments in education aim to give people the skills and knowledge they need to thrive in the labor market, empowering them economically and creating pathways for upward mobility. Progressive taxation, where those with higher incomes pay a bigger share of their earnings in taxes, helps to redistribute income and fund social programs that benefit those who need them most. Uruguay has made real progress in reducing poverty and creating a more inclusive society. But there's still work to be done. Those persistent income gaps, disparities in access to quality education and healthcare, and regional imbalances all show us that we need ongoing efforts to ensure that the benefits of economic growth are reaching everyone fairly. Addressing these challenges demands a continuous commitment to policies that promote inclusive growth, create equal opportunities, and uphold social justice. So, Uruguay's economic journey holds some valuable lessons for other countries. It demonstrates the importance of sound macroeconomic management, implementing structural reforms, investing in human capital, and focusing on social inclusion. If policymakers keep all of these things in mind, they can guide their countries towards sustainable development and a brighter future for their people. As we wrap up this deep dive into the world of economics, looking at it through the lens of Uruguay, there's a big question that sticks with us. How can nations achieve a balance between economic growth, environmental sustainability, and social equity? It's a tough question, but it gets right to the heart of our collective efforts to build a world that's more prosperous, just, and sustainable for everyone.